Next speaker is certainly doesn't need to be introduced to many of you. Bill Dallas wrote his own introduction here, so I'm going to read this to you, but coming from Bill Dallas's word. Bill Dallas is an outlier. Does anybody know what an outlier is? What's an outlier? Anybody know? It's a maverick. Someone outside the box, someone who's doing things above and beyond, away from the norm. This is what Bill Dallas is. He is a Juris Doctor, a leading authority on real estate, mortgage lending, quote-unquote fintech, and entrepreneurship. This theme of entrepreneurship is really something that we're learning from Bill Dallas, who I think certainly embraces that term. He's not a professional speaker like Terry. He's not an economist like Mark. But he has spent the last 30 years stirring spectators in schools and organizations, such as Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, National City Bank, Mortgage Bankers Association, California Mortgage Bankers, American Bankers, California Lutheran University, Santa Clara, Oaks Christian. I could go on and on. He's been involved as a very strong participant in all of those organizations and companies. Bill is a successful entrepreneur, a father of 5, and a local legend in his own mind. Please welcome Bill Dallas, who's going to talk to us this morning about the housing market.
God bless Terry Paulson, first of all. And I think optimism, I remember my parents gave me one, and I think we show maybe our age a bit when we start using all these little clips, because mine will be a little different. But my parents always had one of these cutouts, and they had it on the refrigerator like we used to, something that's stuck on the refrigerator. I don't know if anything sticks there anymore. But at the end of the day, it was a pessimist headstone, and it just said, "I expected this." And I think the optimism advantage, I don't know that an entrepreneur or an outlier is an optimist. I think we are realists. I think we're paranoid schizophrenics, basically, because there isn't a time that something isn't. The opposite of success is always failure, and the opposite of up is down, and the opposite of in is out, right? So an outlier is a noun. It doesn't come from the root word out and liar, so I'm not a liar, right? It's L-I-E-R. And I think what it means is that an outlier is you are completely, if there is a cluster of marbles in the center, or there's a scattergram, or there's a plotted group of everybody in one section, the outlier is away from that section, right? The outlier is always marked away from the group. That, in America, is an entrepreneur. There's nothing more discriminating than being called an entrepreneur. My parents wanted me to go to college and get a job, pay off the school loans, don't take any risks, get married quickly, have 4 children, get divorced, find the other 2, go down the path again, right? The American dream. We chase income, we don't add value, right? And that's our challenge. I think the challenge and the problem of America is that we don't value entrepreneurship at all. And all of our systems are built to degrade them. And I'll just say, you've already said, I'm an entrepreneur. So your first thought, he's a risk taker, he's a maverick. I am the last thing. I'm a devout Christian. I don't really take any risks. I don't high dive. I don't jump out of planes. I don't do anything. I have 5 children, which is probably the biggest risk I've ever taken. Trying to parent them is probably the second largest risk I've ever taken. And I think all we do, what I've learned about that, I want to share with you today. But we are outliers, right? And I think the thought, I use, it's not my term. It's Malcolm Gladwell's term, right? He wrote Tipping Point, Blink, What the Dog Saw. mean, all these current books, but if you haven't had the opportunity to read Outlier, please do. And Wayne Gretzky is an outlier. I mean, everybody you meet probably who is really successful is an outlier. Not that I'm trying to brag, but you are just different. You process different, you work different, you think different. And so what I want to try to do is say, how in God's name can we create entrepreneurs in a society that's outsourcing, in a society that's totally pessimistic, and almost every chip is stacked against you to go take a risk. And so I think when we look at these, and I start looking at this, they called in one of the components, I don't know if I can sort of get it, is this 10,000, you see birth date and 10,000 hours. So in the book, it starts with the study of the Berlin School and violinists, right? And so the study was that all these violinists that came to the Berlin School had all been playing the violin since they were 5. And then they divided the group into really 3 groups. They called the first group stars, the second group they called good, and what do you think they called the third group? Public music teachers. Right? And they all started playing when they were 5. What's the difference between why did somebody become an outlier or a star? 10,000 hours. They spent more than 10,000 hours practicing. They practice hard, they study hard, they play hard. They do everything in their power to be expert at what they do. You know, that is what I think in real estate or in my business, an entrepreneur is somebody that spent, and I call myself an outlier because I have 80,000 hours in real estate and in mortgage lending. 80,000. 40 years, 40 hours, 365, right? So I've never worked for anybody. You know, no matter what the business is. So whether it's Fox Sports Grill, or whether it's First Franklin, or Skyline, or New Leaf, or Oaks Christian, all these businesses we started. Every one. I managed Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen, the Olsen twins. Can you imagine? The greatest 2 women entrepreneurs I've ever met, working since 0. At 12, they were almost over the hill. How old do you think they are today? They're like 27. And they still are paranoid and schizophrenic like me. So when you look at all of this, and 5 kids, one of the one at the bottom, I have 2 of my kids, so I force all my children to, as they're going through school, to start an LLC. And it's called Jake, Nick, Billy, Adam, Bobby Joe LLC. They start their business, they got to go to a lawyer, they got to start the LLC, they got to figure out what the difference of the structure is between a corporation and a partnership. They've got to go through all of that. They've got to figure out that they're a member. They have a membership interest. They write it. They begin a chance to look at it. They start a business. You know what they don't have? A business. They don't have any idea what they're doing, but they are already starting themselves. So my first son has Hoop Stars. He's been doing this now for 20 years, since he was 18. He trains athletes to learn how to play basketball. And he makes good money at it. He's been doing it, you know, almost his entire adult life. My second son is going to college in Minnesota, and he has a business called All Season Services. And all he does is all day he helps you with your home and your hardscape and all the things you have to do. It's what he loves to do. My pastor, I'm a member here at WPC, and my pastor, Dick Thompson, I get chills talking about it a little bit, but my pastor said, I tried to say, how can we encapsulate faith, Christianity, my belief, and this entrepreneurship elk? How can I convey that to my kids, to students, and people that I affect every day who I want to encourage to become an outlier or take the risk to not be in, be out. And he said, and I'll challenge you today, draw a cross right now. Take a sheet of paper, take notes. I mean, now you can look smart. I'm not telling these guys anything that's not really hard. This is a frickin' cross. Right? Right? It could be any denomination, by the way. So draw the cross. And across the x-axis, draw and just write the words means. M-E-A-N-S. Doesn't mean you're being mean. It means I have to work. I have to earn. I have to make money, right? I've got to do something. I got to pay the bills. I got to wash the car. I got to go to the bank. All those things. On the other axis, what do you write? Meaning. Meaning. My pastor made this really simple for me. He says if you can merge means and meaning, you can have a wonderful life. And you are an entrepreneur. Do what you love to do. Don't do what somebody else wants you to do. And I spend all this time at Oaks. I spend all this time at my church. I spend all this time with my kids. And I'm 50-50. I mean, I have children just like you. Some of them will not take this bait. You know, and yet when you look at them, you send your kid away, right? They come back. And when they come back, you have another opportunity to move them out, to help them become an outlier. Because it is the failure. I love the kids that fail early, that admit mistakes, that have concerns. I teach all of the kids, I say, if you want to be an outlier, then you've got to be comfortable not being in the in group. And everybody, all the parents, all of you want your kids in the in group. That is the number one rule for a kid to not be successful. Yet we spend all of our time funneling in the same funnel. What is wrong with you people? This is not that hard. If you're sitting over here and you're an outlier, you are an outcast. Entrepreneurship isn't that at all. Entrepreneurship is dead center of America's economy. You had the Fortune 500, go to the Fortune 200, go to the Fortune 100, go to the Fortune 25, to go to, oh, screw that. We're going NASDAQ. We're going to go tech. You know, it's technology, entertainment, and design. It's TEDx suddenly. Everything's on the far right. Everything else is dead. We're milking oil, and we're milking the economy from all of its value because people don't create value anymore. They search for income. And so, what have I done? I spent my life building mortgage businesses, real estate businesses, and basically from the ground up. First Franklin, own it, and you see each beginning and end is almost what I backed into is the key that I want to talk to you about today about being successful as an outlier. There's, I think, one key, and that is the cycle. I didn't understand cycles. I didn't understand rebounds. I didn't understand the economy. And here's my view. When things are good, every boat gets lifted and everything is fine. When things get bad, everything fails. And think about entrepreneurship. 87%, by the Small Business Administration stats, 87% of all businesses fail. Small business. Right? 87. This isn't like, whoa, 50-50, I got a little chance here. 87. So we have to know why. I think obviously these businesses have a lot of structural issues and problems. Like you two know each other. So you two go into business together, you got no capital. You're married, she's married. Next thing you know, you're divorced, she's not. Now we got a different partner, and off we go, right? We fail just out of sheer stupid structure. Then we don't have any money, we have no capital, and we start a business that we have about 4 hours of experience in. Not 80,000. right? Start a business. And every business I've started, like a restaurant business, which I have started, that I had freaking no experience in, I lost my ass in. Just FYI. And what I've learned is that lure, which used to be my Fox Sports Grill here, is I hire the person who's got 100,000 hours in restaurant, who does fish really well. And you know what I own? I own the building. And I collect the rent. And I like that better. It works really good, versus worrying about food leaving, starvation, I can't buy it, gas prices, and 100 other things. So what I learned about this, and what you'll see in each of these, is there's a natural break. So I sold my business I tried to sell my business the first time to DLJ in 1994, and they bought it for a lot of money. And then they screwed it up, and I got it back. And then I built it again. I sold it again, this time to Bank of America. And what did they do? They screwed it up. And so I got it back. And then I sold it again to National City Bank. And I thought, wow. And then they sold it. We sold it again to Merrill Lynch. And in the meantime, I started another business and sold that to Merrill Lynch. I said, this is the greatest thing I've ever figured out. This is the gift that keeps on giving. And then as I sort of backed into it, I said, well, let's take a look at what really happened. So in 1994, when I first sold my business, what I figured out was interest rates, which had gone, look, I'm not that smart. I'm a liberal arts guy, right? So I'm not a math dude. And then I went to law school. So I do have some skills, but not many. What we did figure out is, and I did like what Terry said, you sort of believe, you think, you act. Then I think the next action is you fail and you review what pilots used to call, what do? We debrief the mission. And we debrief, then we act again. So what I have figured out in this business is it's all about the cycle. So in 94, interest rates go up 6 times, cycle shuts down, I get my business back. 98, we go into recession, right? Recession hits, I get my business back. Year 2000, big recession, right? .com bust, gonna fail, whole world, get my business back. September 11th, right? September 11th, what happens? Bombs hit, what happens to interest rates? Drop, everybody rushes into real estate. It had already had a 20-year run. I'm now extraordinarily cautious, but see an opportunity and jump back into the business knowing full well that it will fail. The last time I spoke to this group, the message I gave you was duck or bleed, baby. This market is going to eat you, and it will eat every one of you. I remember having this conversation with Angelo Mazzillo at Countrywide. He said, hey, when the tide goes out, all you subprime, blah, 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 guys, you're going to be naked. I said, you're going to be the most nude guy on the beach. Because you buy everything, right? And when the tide went out, what we found was America was really not prepared for a 30% drop in home prices. Well, if we did our little scattergram and we looked at data, the data was crying out for you to do this, that it would fail. Why didn't it fail? Well, interest rates go to zero. For a while, everybody runs to the asset class, right? So now what have we done? Well, so I got out of the business. So, story, December of 06, I quit. I closed my business. Merrill Lynch said, you are a moron. I said, time will tell whether I am or not, and got out of the business. We debriefed, and we set stage what we're trying to do today at Skyline, right? Which is take advantage of a new breed of mortgage lender, take advantage of technology and products. Well, today, products can't be any worse, right? There's one product. What is it in mortgage? A 30-year fixed rate loan. It can't be that difficult. Now, I do have to disclose the 30-year loan about 80 times to try to tell you that the rate doesn't change and nothing happens ever and everything's about you now, suddenly the consumer. But at the end of the day, it's going to be about, there's still 40% of Americans stuck in the coma who can't move. They've hamped, harped, now they hope. Somebody's not going to kick them out. Somebody's going to help them with their mortgage. So we're back today trying to build products and technology to work within the industry to not only fix it, but then come out of it with mobile apps and with technology, with you being able to log on, check pricing, search for homes, do all those things in the comfort of your home, and know more about the process that you're going through, so it's more transparent to you, and so you can look and be more in control, because that's what happens when you democratize information and you put everything on the internet. There's just a ton of it. So when you look at it, we've built these businesses, and Skyline today, we're 450 people. We'll do about $3 billion. We have about 30 locations. We're predominantly in the West. We do, we basically are what I would say a normal, independent mortgage company, but we're backed by two firms. Upfront Ventures, which is the largest venture capital firm in Southern California, and then Ellington Financial, which is a REIT in New York. And those two companies give us the girth to be able to develop new age technology and do this, and at the same time create the next generation product, which will be, I mean, if you think about mortgage is pretty funny. We have analog systems that are about 100 years old. We're now 92% selling our loans to the government again, because that's the only buyer for mortgages. And what's interesting really about it, probably most interesting, is that the underwriting guidelines and rules have not changed since 1960. And so we're still underwriting Ozzie and Harriet. And Ozzie and Harriet are married, and they have two kids. They live in the cul-de-sac, and Ozzie has the only job, and Ozzie's basically is the primary occupant. Harriet doesn't work. And that is every guideline that's ever been created is about DTI and the primary occupant and credit. And so so here's how Ozzie and Harriet sort of roll today. Ozzie and Harriet got divorced about 10 years ago. And Harriet's gay. And Harriet married the lady across the street, and they started a flower business. Ozzie moved away. The kids, we don't know where they are. And they've all grown up, and everybody's a borrower. Right? So now forget Latino, Hispanic, forget you've got an invasion of just color, creed. I'll stay just with gender for a minute. When I started in the mortgage business, we had no data on single women. None. We didn't have a loan that we could find for a single woman. Today, it's 20% of the market. And we can't, even though you make less money, and you have primary care, and you don't collect from the deadbeat dad, generally, you have all of those things, you have zero default. If I had a single man and lined up that single man, that guy's like a walking default. He'll remarry twice. He'll do all the things wrong. He's never learned anything, right? Now, obviously, I process my loans for the federal government, so I can't talk about this in file because I have to file HMDA data and all of this other data that says I can't talk about the demographic look. But I think Skyline and New Leaf, we're trying to do mortgages differently, but at the end of the day, it's going to be about products and how you get the current group of Americans who are multiple occupant co-borrowers with wide swath of where they work. Forget unemployed. Employed, gaps in employment. I have children. You don't work for a few months. Well, I mean, we can't, you guys, how many of you applied for a loan recently? Ever been in? I mean, is this the worst process that's ever been created? It's like baggage claim at LAX with nobody there. So I started looking at cycles. And so I want to encourage you, Arnold Toynbee is probably one of the greatest British historians of all time, and he did a study of civilizations. And what he did was he looked at the study and he examined the rise and fall of 26 civilizations. And basically, if you study this, I can encapsulate, which is what I tried to do, all of history can be summed up in a line: challenge and response. Challenge, response. Challenge, response. Think about it, right? And how, think about our current cycle. We're so pessimistic about the cycle, we basically are frozen. We're orphaning the number one asset in your life, your single family home. You think it's toxic? I think it's home sweet home, right? Why? Because the media will tell you it's toxic. They'll give you thousands of reasons why it's toxic. And what we find is that this study will tell you, and you can go read it. It's 10 volumes of, I just summed it up for you. If you like the Cliff Notes, it's challenge and response. Every company, every world, every civilization, the same. So when you look at what we're doing in mortgage, is you basically have a business that's fractionalized, dead, and it's trying to respond, but it's not, right? It just won't. So when you look at it, I think what we try to do is it toxic really? Well, look at what we've told everybody. We've said, is the dream over, right? Yeah, the American dream is over. The millennials actually believe this, right? They think this is true. And you look at anything from meltdown to flipping houses to the bubble to 99% to the 1% club to frying poor old Angelo to flipping that house, all these different things to my favorite. I basically did the House of Cards. And so you look at all of these things and you say, there is a new normal, right? We're in a new economy. We are. And so my message in 2007 was duck. You got to get down low. You got to save your house at all costs. This house will be worth a lot of money, but it's going to be worth a lot less before it's worth a lot more. So how can you keep it, save it? You know, what can you do? Because time and output are really the only things you can do to control in this new economy. And there are many views of economy A or B. Who's driving it? Are we global? Are we domestic? You know, I'm not that smart. My new normal basically is after 8 years, housing has arrived. Fed basically has subsidized interest rates, right, and continues to, even though there's no quantitative easing. We call it the taper tantrum is over to some degree, but at the end of the day, the market's got them in a low rate trading range. We've got low inflation. Inflation will remain low and likely stay that way. I think the economy, we're sort of, I think Ron said it probably, you know, we're probably the best, or maybe Terry too, the best of the worst. So our economy doesn't look too bad, and we are emerging from this low everything environment. I think it has fundamentally changed the consumer. The consumer now, I call the consumer cost code, right? The consumer basically wants to go direct, but with great service, and get a wholesale price on everything, right? Everything. So, I mean, if you can't steal it, then I'm not buying it. We were talking about buying a car using TrueCar, and you can basically walk in with your mobile app and say, okay, here's the price that I think is fair, because this is what 3 guys are going to say. Well, you sell it at that price. That's a little different than traipsing in and going in to buy your car. Home prices continue to rise. Unfortunately, rents will rise faster, and they are. I think millennials will buy less expensive, smaller homes that are more urban than suburban. Buyers will have considerably more negotiating power than they currently do, right? I think builders will construct less expensive, smaller homes. God willing, they could ever get an entitlement. And lower U.S. energy prices will boost employment and consumer confidence more than anything. Low energy prices drive, we talked about low energy prices last night in the dollar, right? A strong dollar and low energy prices we sort of walk around with a little swagger, but we have not changed a thing. We still suck. As a country, our values are slipping, Everything we do, we can't educate people. I mean, it's like, but we're emerging, right? It's like, wow, things are better because I can go drive somewhere and it costs me less. Agencies, and you know what was funny? We bailed out a bunch of things. The two biggest ones we bailed out in my industry were Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And those two companies are making more money than almost anything right now. So the agencies won't go away. At the end of the day, the new and improved home sweet home will be driven by this market. So what's the new normal in a nutshell? Well, I think I just want to leave you with some thoughts, right? America's on sale, right? I mean, everybody loves a sale, right? Not this one. It's the mother of all markets. It's the best. It's the most amazing market. Interest rates are low. Homes are affordable. And you'll never have this, you'll never be at the nadir with this alchemy ever again in your life. And nobody's buying. It's amazing. You know who is buying? Investors. They're slopping this up. I mean, you got two companies in town. You got Homes for Rent, and then you've got, we talked about Wayne Hughes and their company, where everybody's suddenly buying single families, buying them out of foreclosure, flipping them, renting them back to you. I mean, this is pretty interesting. It's the largest single asset class growth in history in my business. Single family fix and flips or hold for rent. And so we got some dirty little secrets I'm going to talk about, and then we're going to talk a little bit about home sweet home. But if we go to, if we look at really America's on sale, why are they not buying? Why do you think? I think fear. What else? I don't think they can qualify. They've hamped. I know 40. So if you think about this, a normal first-time home buyer market is about 45% of our market are first-time home buyers buying. It's 28%. So the millennials clearly are delaying. That's slowing things down. On the top end, you have people refinancing or buying. People are buying big houses all over the place. Never seen anything quite like it. You go into Silicon Beach and go up above that and you go over to look at Hollywood Hills or above Santa Monica, you got people paying insane numbers. You go up to Northern California, where things are booming. You go to Los Gatos, Los Altos, you move up the coast there. It is booming. High ticket pricing. What's not moving is there are about 40% of Americans, 20% of them are below value still, and another 20% are right at value, but they've hamped and harped and hoped and they can't qualify. 40% are stuck in the colon. They can't move. They won't move. So we have to create problems. We've got to get the consumer off the couch. The consumer is going to buy a home again a second time. So what do we see? 33%, think of this, 33% of all home sales are sold today cash. A normal market is 1 to 2% cash buyers. 33%, and that's down from 50. So clearly 30% are cash. 50% of the homes listed or sold are still listed and sold, and the owner is a bank. 50%. So it's not even a normal seller, right? And you look at that, and then you add to it the 20% of all home sales are sold to investors, largest growing asset class I just talked about. Customers are spooked, loans are tough, millennials are changing things, and timing is everything. I'm going to go back to a little bit. Why? Look at all these regulatory actions. I mean, you think your government is at work? They have basically foobarred my business. I give you a disclosure before the meltdown. I would give you a casual disclosure with RESPA, or we would give you some casual disclosures about your loan. Today, I redisclose 5 or 6 times. I have to connect what we quoted you at the front to what we closed at the back. And all my loan officers have gone from non-employee to employees. Think about if you did that to realtors. I go into a real estate office here locally. One, I won't mention, 380 agents. You know how many have done a deal this last year? How many do you think of 380 did a transaction? It's not quite that low, but it's close to 3, right? So you have less than 10% doing a transaction. If you made them all employees and you had to pay them minimum wage and you had to take out benefits, how many would you have? About 8, right? So basically, that industry, home valuation code, RESPA, mortgage loan disclosure act, things that you've heard, Dodd-Frank, Wall Street reform, the new consumer, I have not even met my regulator, the CFPB, and they are issuing new rules by the minute, right? GSE reform and then loan officer comp. I mean, they've spooked not only us, they made it feel toxic, and it's disrupted the market. What happened since I spoke to you last is this market that began in 2006 with 55,000 mortgage brokers, 30% of the volume going to banks, and 70% going to independent mortgage companies like Countrywide, First Franklin, Own It, all these things that failed, flipped immediately. 77% of the business today goes to 4 banks. And then another 8% goes to the rest of the banks. And then you've got 15% going to independent mortgage companies. And you've got almost the destruction of the mortgage broker industry, less than 10,000, right? So what you've seen are banks got bailed out, so they lived, brokers got blamed, and buyers basically were baffled and have no idea how to do this, how to navigate what they're doing. But timing is everything, and so where Terry was going, I think the psychology, so what have I learned as an entrepreneur in my space? If you're going to be in real estate, if you are going to be an entrepreneur in your business, you've got to have 80,000 hours of experience to be really good at what you do first. The second thing you have to do, and probably most important, is you're going to be viewed as an outlier. So as an outlier, the first thing that happens is you can't qualify for loans. You're self-employed, right? You can't get benefits. The largest single growing default, if you took the 5 major defaults that have occurred since the dawn of time, why everything defaults, when I started in this, their overextension of credit was 1, job loss was 2, right? Those are the 2 big ones. One that was way down the path was medical. That was less than 10% 20 years ago. You know how much it is today? Medical, slip and fall, no benefit, killed you during your job is 70% of all bankruptcies. 70. And you know what? We do not underwrite one thing in your loan about medical. And the entrepreneur, the outlier, has to figure out how they can navigate and get capital when they can't qualify for anything. The whole banking industry is shifted against them to employed people. They don't have benefits, right? The whole education army is against you, right? And you probably, if you survive because you're smart and understand the cycle. And the cycle is the same every time. So what I looked about is optimism starts with, and then it sort of overheats, right? It overheats to excitement. Then it goes to thrill. Oh, think about 03, 04. I can't get enough. I'm going to buy the house across the street. My nanny's buying the house. The guy that does my cars buying the house. Lenny Dykstra, my neighbor, bought a bunch of houses. I mean, so you've got all these things happening. And it moves to euphoria. Everybody should get a house. You know what that tells me? When it starts moving past optimism, what do? It's over. I told all my kids, duck or bleed, because timing's everything. And then you move into anxiety, denial, and fear, and desperation, and panic, and capitulation, and despondency, and depression. That is about what you said we were in, right? That was a great slide. Where were we in 2008? We were somewhere down in here. So where are we? Well, I think the stock market today is at the point of maximum financial risk. Right? I think it's high. Nobody knows why it's high. Right? They just keeps trading. A lot of people keep making money between 17,000 and 18,000, and and 16,000 and 17,000. But it's the same people trading. It's almost funny. You look at, and where is real estate? If you had to plot it, where do you think it is? The point of maximum financial opportunity. And nobody cares. The only people buying are the investors. Everybody else is just blah, blah, blah. So your millennials aren't buying. We may never buy a home. I may never buy a home again. What are you, the stupidest people on the planet? Do you not ever want to retire? The only way an entrepreneur balances the risk of owning their business is by owning the real estate their business is in. Owning their house. Most of them get their equity, use the equity from their house to start their business. Right? So all of that real estate is so essential to the entrepreneur, so you've got to really understand the cycle. And as we move up, I mean, we've got a long way to go, you all, before we get to hope, relief, and optimism. We're not even close to excitement, thrill, and euphoria again. And when you do, recognize I told you to get out. Duck at that point. When everybody wants the asset, don't do it. Begin to question, think, because our business is inherently cyclical. And if you think about an entrepreneur has 5 things that they have to really navigate. Self-employed, benefits, lack of capital, lack of education, and cycle. Manage this cycle. Those 5 things I teach entrepreneurs, but they end up with this understanding their business cycle, their calendar cycle, the macro cycle that their industry is in. And all of our industries are different to some extent. I mean, one of the things we were talking about, mortgage business is interesting in one fact. 42% of all of our loans fund in the last 5 days of the month. Why? I don't know. I think it's because realtors don't want to have closing costs be so big, so they try to close to the end of the month. We've tried figuring out how to manage it. It's just a cycle. It's part of what we do. I think what this does, this has basically changed the way what's happening at its demographic, and I know Mark's going to talk about demographics a little bit more. What's happening is the demographic core is changing. I think it's reverting to the way it used to be, but I'll let you be the judge, right, of how you think about it, maybe. But I can, because people talk about Gen Xers, they talk about boomers, they talk about the millennials coming up. The millennial cohort is so big that everybody's just passed over the Gen Xers. Just like the veterans group sort of passed over the silents. My dad was in the silent generation. The Gen Xers are sort of silent. The millennials are pretty loud, right? And so what have we learned? All of these are life events that create borrowing, that create need. What are the two? So what's happening to millennials? They are delaying their life events. And they're delaying them to push back marriage, kids, and homes because their jobs are weird. They may have. Ozzy had how many jobs? 1. Harriet had Zippo. How many? Sony predicted, and I read this study coming out of it, how many jobs do you think your children in the millennial generation will have? 50. And they may be in 3 to 4 different sectors. So just think about qualifying. My qualifying guideline is 2 years of stable employment history. You know what stable employment history is? Take out the Bible, put it down, put your hand on there, raise your other hand and say, I promise to try to pay. And you know what we figured out is your FICO score, your credit score is the only thing that we can use that really predicts default. And the problem with FICO is if I got 9 people borrowing, how in God's name do I know which one to use? Versus 1. So it's an amazing shift. It's the mother of all markets. Markets are stabilizing. Many in SoCal are experiencing historic home price appreciation. However, loans are still affordable. They're the most affordable they've ever been. One interesting stat is home ownership has gone from almost 70% to 63% and dropping lower. This is the lowest it's been in 25 years. So why? I think millennials and people stuck in the colon can't move. So you're looking at it, there are 29 million new young buyers entering the market, and they're all entering wildly and differently. And then you look at, according to Trillia, buying is now cheaper in almost 100 markets, and people still are renting. Why? They don't really understand. So my job with you today is just say, look, the dirty secrets are getting a mortgage is a pain, right? It is. You have to have vanilla scores. You got to be employed. Underwriting basic rule is don't ever commit the sins of the past. So we tighten down everything. We're so focused today on income and assets and reserves, we can hardly get over ourselves. And so we'll validate everything. 68%, think of this, 4 years ago there was no such thing as a mobile app. No such thing. Think about that. How many of them little icon things you got on your little mobile thing right now? Lots. And one of them I bet you got is a search app. Whether you get it from Redfin, Trillia, Zillow, or somebody else, you get them there. That is 68% of all search begin on mobile. And that just happened in 4 years. People are looking, and they're looking for a long time. 92% of all the loans are government-owned. Home prices are still at 2006 levels, and investors are all in. Everyone still wants a steal. They want a deal, right? Real estate is still the best investment on earth. The best investment is earth, right? And I think what you'll find is why. And we always go back to, I think it was Albert Einstein who said the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest. Real estate is the only investment that's ever been created that not only allows you to compound, you can compound with leverage. Because you use opium, you use the wonder drug, other people's money, you put a little bit of money down, the bank lends you a lot of money, and you get all the goodies, right? All of them. What's interesting is you're paying for housing whether you own or rent. So I sort of look at it like I get leverage, I get indentured servitude. It's the only real way I can really use slavery, right? Who's the biggest slave I know? The renter. They work all month to do what? Make your payment. It's the greatest thing ever created. Legalize slavery. It's amazing. And yet I've got all these millennials. What do they want to do? I just want to rent. You know, why? My job, maybe, blah, blah, you know. Owning is a form of forced savings. There are substantial tax benefits to owning. Owning is a hedge against, it's the only true hedge against inflation. If you don't own a piece of real estate, you will not be able to retire. You will, I guarantee you, you will be wards of the state. You know, and I think, so my view, when I look at real estate, and I'll end, you know, with, I think I'm going to take a Winston Churchill quote and have a little latitude with it. Real estate is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. The one thing I can tell you is real estate is cyclical, and so is entrepreneurship. And if you can create the symmetry between understanding the cycle of real estate, understanding the cycle of really being an entrepreneur, you too can be an outlier. Thank you.